I'm Natalie, 27 now, but I still wake up sometimes in cold sweats remembering that day when I was 13. My parents abandoned me at Greenfield Station, 200 miles from home, laughing as they drove away. Let's see how smart she really is. Find your way home, genius. That joke wasn't just a prank gone wrong. It was the day I realized my family was broken beyond repair. What they didn't know then. Their little abandonment game would ultimately cost them everything, including their precious golden child. Before I continue sharing the most devastating experience of my childhood, I'm curious where you're watching from today. This family story shaped who I am now, and I know many of you have your own family trauma stories. If you've ever felt betrayed by those who should have protected you, press that like button. Subscribe if you want more real stories about family dynamics, justice, and healing from those who are supposed to love us unconditionally. Now, let me take you back to where it all began, before that fateful day at the train station when my so-called perfect family showed their true colors. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect family that everyone in our suburban Connecticut neighborhood envied. Our colonial house stood proudly on Maple Avenue with its manicured lawn and seasonal decorations that my mother, Elaine, meticulously changed with each holiday. My father, Richard, drove a sleek black Mercedes to his prestigious law firm where he worked as a corporate attorney, bringing home the kind of salary that afforded us country club memberships and annual European vacations. My mother wasn't just a housewife. She had her own successful career as a real estate agent, selling million-dollar properties to other affluent families looking to join our exclusive community. Her gleaming white Range Rover with personalized plates reading Elaine Sells was almost as recognizable in town as her perfectly highlighted blonde hair and designer outfits. Then there was my brother Trevor. At 17, he was everything my parents had ever wanted in a child. Captain of the lacrosse team, prom king nominee, with a charming smile that got him out of any trouble he occasionally found himself in. His bedroom walls were covered with trophies, medals, and team photos. The basement was practically a shrine to his athletic achievements, with my father having built special shelving units to display every award Trevor had ever received, including participation trophies from kindergarten t-ball. And then there was me, Natalie, the second child. The afterthought. While Trevor was out winning games and popularity contests, I was winning academic competitions. I had skipped 5th grade due to my test scores and was already taking advanced placement classes by 7th grade. Science was my passion. The periodic table fascinated me more than any television show, and I'd already decided I wanted to become a research scientist, maybe even work for NASA someday. Not that any of that impressed my parents. Another A plus? Well, that's expected, isn't it? My father would say, barely glancing at my report card before turning back to his newspaper. Book smarts aren't real-world smarts, Natalie. Let's see how you do when you actually have to interact with people instead of just books. Meanwhile, Trevor would come home with C+s and get treated to ice cream. A C+ in calculus? That's my boy. Athletes don't need math anyway. This calls for celebration. The double standard was so blatant it was almost comical. Almost. I still remember the state science fair, where my project on sustainable energy won first place. I'd spent months researching, building, and perfecting a small-scale solar power system that could charge multiple devices simultaneously. The judges were so impressed they suggested I apply for a special summer program at MIT for gifted students. I came home clutching my blue ribbon and certificate, heart pounding with excitement.
Mom, Dad.
I won state. The judges said my project could qualify for nationals. My mother looked up from her real estate listings. That's nice, honey. Did you see the mail came? I think there's something from Trevor's lacrosse camp. That same evening, Trevor came home with a participation trophy from a lacrosse tournament his team had lost in the first round. My parents immediately suggested a family dinner at Castellano's, the fanciest Italian restaurant in town. Our son deserves to be celebrated, my father announced, as if I wasn't even in the room. During dinner, they spent the entire time discussing Trevor's plays in the game, despite the loss. My science fair win wasn't mentioned once. When the waiter asked if we were celebrating something special, my father proudly said, "Our son's athletic accomplishments." I sat there pushing pasta around my plate, invisible. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was our family dynamic. My mother enabled my father's controlling behavior, and Trevor, seeing how it benefited him, began to mimic it. He learned early that he could get away with anything while I would be criticized for the smallest infractions. Stand up straight, Natalie. Don't read at the table, Natalie. Why can't you be more outgoing like your brother, Natalie? That outfit makes you look awkward, Natalie. No one likes a know-it-all, Natalie. My only allies were my grandparents, particularly my father's parents who lived nearby. Grandmother Eleanor would often invite me over for tea and cookies, creating a safe space where I could talk about my interests without being mocked or dismissed. She had a background in education before retirement and genuinely appreciated my intellectual curiosity. "Your mind is a gift, Natalie," she would tell me, her eyes crinkling with warmth. "Don't let anyone dim your light." I noticed how she would frown slightly when my parents would make dismissive comments about my achievements, or when they would lavish excessive praise on Trevor for minimal effort. She saw the unfair treatment but seemed hesitant to directly intervene. I later learned she had tried to speak to my father about it once, only to be shut down completely. "Don't tell me how to raise my children, Mother," he had apparently said. "We're making sure Natalie doesn't grow up entitled. The real world isn't going to coddle her like you want to." In the weeks leading up to that summer vacation, the tension in our house had been escalating. I had begun to question the family dynamic more openly, asking why Trevor was allowed to stay out past curfew when I was expected to be home by 8, or why he got a new laptop for getting a B- while I was still using an outdated computer despite my perfect grades. "Because life isn't fair," my father would snap. "The sooner you learn that, the better." Little did I know just how unfair my parents were planning to make it. Summer vacation had finally arrived, bringing with it the annual tradition of visiting my mother's sister in Vermont. Aunt Patricia lived in a charming farmhouse near Burlington, and despite the tension at home, I was looking forward to the trip. Aunt Patricia was different from my mother, warmer, more attentive, and she always had interesting books waiting for me when we visited. The morning of our departure, I packed carefully, making sure to include my summer reading list books and my journal. Trevor, as usual, was running late, throwing random items into his duffel bag at the last minute while my parents patiently waited. "Hurry up, Natalie," my mother called up the stairs, despite the fact that I was already standing in the foyer with my neatly packed bag. "We're waiting on you." The 4-hour drive started with the usual argument about seating. Despite being 4 years older and significantly larger, Trevor claimed the front passenger seat. "I get carsick in the back," he complained, though this miraculous ailment never seemed to affect him when riding with friends. My father backed him up immediately. "Trevor needs the legroom, Natalie. Don't be difficult." So I found myself in the back seat, squeezed next to Trevor's extra bags because the trunk was allegedly full. My father controlled the radio, switching between sports talk and classic rock that only he enjoyed. Any request from me to change the station was met with sighs and comments about accommodating everyone's preferences, everyone meaning everyone but me. About 3 hours into the journey, we pulled off the highway into a small town I didn't recognize. "We need to make a pit stop," my father announced. "There's a train station here with clean bathrooms. Plus I need to stretch my legs." The station was called Greenfield, a quaint but clearly rural stop that seemed to service only a few trains per day according to the schedule board. It was older, with wooden benches and large windows overlooking the single track. Only one elderly woman in a station attendant's uniform was visible behind a ticket counter. 15 minutes, my father said, as we all got out of the car. "Use the bathroom and grab snacks if you need them." I headed to the restroom first, then browsed the small gift shop, buying a postcard to send to my best friend Emma when we reached Aunt Patricia's. I then wandered over to a large map display showing the regional train routes, fascinated by the intricate network of lines connecting different towns and cities. I was so absorbed in the map that I didn't immediately notice the unusual quiet that had fallen over the station. Turning around, I felt a flash of confusion. My family was nowhere to be seen. Mom?
Dad.
I called out, thinking they might be in another part of the building. No answer. A sense of unease began to creep up my spine as I walked quickly to the main entrance. Through the large glass windows, I saw our family car pulling out of the parking lot. For a split second, I thought there must be some mistake. Maybe they were repositioning the car? Then I saw my father's face through the driver's window. He was laughing. My mother was animated in the passenger seat, gesturing excitedly. Trevor was leaning forward from the back seat, pointing in my direction as the car accelerated toward the exit. My father rolled down his window and shouted, his voice carrying across the nearly empty parking lot. "Let's see how smart she really is. Find your way home, genius." The car disappeared onto the main road, leaving me standing there, frozen in disbelief. This couldn't be happening. Parents don't abandon their children at random train stations 200 miles from home. They just don't. But mine had. I reached for my phone to call someone. Anyone. It wasn't in my pocket. Frantically, I checked all my pockets, then remembered. My father had collected our phones that morning, saying he wanted a device-free family trip. He had mine. They'd planned this. I ran outside, hoping irrationally that they would circle back, that this was just a few minutes of cruelty before they returned, laughing at my panic. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. They weren't coming back. With shaking hands, I checked my wallet.
$20.
That was it. Nowhere near enough for a train or bus ticket all the way back to Connecticut. "Are you all right, dear?" The elderly station attendant had approached without me noticing. Her name tag read Martha, and her kind face was creased with concern. "I'm fine," I said automatically, embarrassment flooding through me. How could I possibly explain that my own parents had just abandoned me as some sort of sick test? "My family will be back soon. They just want to get something." Martha didn't look convinced. They drove away pretty fast for people planning to come right back. I felt tears threatening and fought them back. Crying wouldn't help, and I refused to break down in front of a stranger. "It's a game," I lied, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. "Hide and seek. Family tradition." "Well, if you need anything, I'll be at the counter," Martha said, her eyes still reflecting concern. "Next train isn't for 3 hours, just so you know." As she walked away, the reality of my situation began to sink in. I was stranded in a town I'd never heard of, with minimal money, no phone, and no immediate way home. My parents had deliberately put me in danger to teach me some twisted lesson. I found a payphone and tried calling our home number collect, but no one answered. I tried my grandmother's number, but couldn't remember it correctly without my phone contacts. After 3 failed attempts, I gave up. Opening my backpack to assess what resources I had, I discovered they'd thoughtfully packed a few granola bars, a small water bottle, and a note in my mother's handwriting. "Use that big brain of yours. See you when you figure it out. No calling home. That's cheating." They'd removed my books and journal, replacing them with these meager supplies. This confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't impulsive. They had planned to abandon me all along. As the hours passed and no family car reappeared, Martha's professional demeanor gave way to genuine alarm. "Honey, I don't mean to pry, but are you sure everything's okay? It's been 3 hours." The weight of the situation finally broke my composure. Tears began streaming down my face as I told Martha the truth, that my parents had deliberately left me here as some sort of test or punishment, that they'd taken my phone, that I had no way to get home. "They called it a joke," I said, my voice breaking. "Said they wanted to see if I was as smart as I think I am." Martha's face transformed from concern to outrage. "That's not a joke, dear. That's child endangerment. I should call the police right now." "No." The thought of police involvement terrified me more than being stranded. "Please don't. They'll be so angry. They'll say I overreacted, that I should have figured it out myself." Martha hesitated, clearly conflicted between respecting my wishes and doing what she felt was right. "At the very least, let me help you figure out how to get home safely. Where do you live?" "Lakeshire, Connecticut," I replied. wiping away tears. It's about 200 miles from here. Martha's frown deepened. 200 miles? Good Lord. What were they thinking? For the first time that day, I felt someone was actually on my side. Martha brought me behind the ticket counter, sat me down in her chair, and handed me a tissue box and a bottle of water from her personal cooler. First things first, she said, her voice gentle but firm. You need to understand something, Natalie. What your parents did isn't normal.
It isn't okay.
Parents don't abandon their children to test them. Her words hit me harder than I expected. Despite everything, some part of me had still been making excuses for them, still believing that perhaps this was just tough love, that maybe I was overreacting. My parents have always been harder on me than my brother, I found myself explaining. They say it's because I'm smarter, so I should be able to handle more. That I need to be prepared for the real world. Martha's expression softened with sadness. The real world can be tough, that's true. But family is supposed to be your safe harbor, not another place you have to prove your worth. She pulled out a map and began checking train and bus schedules on her computer terminal. A ticket all the way to Connecticut would cost about $80, which is more than you have. But we need to think strategically here. For the next hour, Martha and I worked on a plan. The train station had a lost and found box with an unclaimed phone charger, which Martha let me use with her ancient flip phone to try calling my grandmother again. I still couldn't remember the number correctly. I have an idea, Martha said suddenly. My grandson Connor is driving back to Boston tonight for summer classes. That's about halfway to Connecticut. If you can get to Boston, there are cheaper bus options from there. She made a quick call, and I could hear her explaining the situation in hushed, urgent tones. When she hung up, she was smiling. Connor will be here in an hour. He's a good boy, studying engineering at MIT. He can give you a ride to Boston. While we waited, Martha shared some of her homemade sandwiches with me and told me about her own childhood growing up with a difficult father. He was a military man who believed children should be seen and not heard, she said. It took me years to realize that his treatment wasn't about my failings, but his own. Some parents, Natalie, are simply incapable of giving their children what they need. When Connor arrived, I was struck by how immediately angry he became upon hearing the full story. Unlike his grandmother, he didn't try to hide his outrage. That's messed up, he said bluntly. If I ever have kids, I'd never in a million years pull something like that. Connor was tall with kind eyes and a Boston Red Sox cap. He cleared textbooks off his passenger seat and helped me into his car, a beat-up Honda that had seen better days. Grandma raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 7, he explained as we drove. She worked double shifts as a nurse and still never missed a school event. That's what family is supposed to do, show up for each other. The contrast between Connor's experience with his grandmother and my experience with my parents was stark and painful. During the 3-hour drive to Boston, we talked about everything from science — he was impressed by my knowledge of astronomy — to music, to what it was like growing up with loss versus growing up with conditional love. Both are hard in different ways, he acknowledged. But at least I always knew my grandma had my back 100%. When we reached the Boston bus terminal, Connor insisted on buying my ticket to Connecticut despite my protests. I'm a broke college student, but not that broke, he said firmly. Besides, my grandma would kill me if I didn't make sure you got home safe. He waited with me until my bus arrived, made sure I had his phone number written down, and even gave me his emergency phone battery pack. Text me when you get home safe, okay? And if you ever need anything, I mean it, anything, you call me. The kindness of these strangers, Martha and Connor, compared to the cruelty of my own family, brought fresh tears to my eyes. The bus was nearly empty when I boarded. I found a seat near the front and watched the city lights fade as we headed south toward Connecticut. About an hour into the journey, an elderly couple boarded at a stop in Worcester. With plenty of empty seats available, I was surprised when they asked if they could sit near me. A young girl shouldn't be traveling alone at this hour, the woman said kindly. She introduced herself as Helen Miller and her husband as George. Mrs. Miller reminded me of a classic grandmother from a storybook, with silver hair pulled into a neat bun and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. Mr. Miller was tall and thin with a bristly, white mustache and gentle eyes. When Mrs. Miller offered me a homemade cookie from a small tin, I found myself telling them my story. I hadn't planned to. The words just tumbled out, perhaps because I was exhausted, perhaps because they reminded me of what grandparents should be. Mrs. Miller listened intently, occasionally exchanging glances with her husband. When I finished, she took my hand in hers. "I was a school counselor for 35 years before I retired," she said. "What you're describing, Natalie, is emotional abuse. The favoritism, the dismissal of your achievements, and especially this abandonment. These are not normal parenting methods." Hearing the word abuse applied to my situation was jarring. In my mind, abuse meant bruises and broken bones, not emotional manipulation and neglect. "But they provide for me," I protested weakly. "I have food, clothes, a nice house." "Emotional needs are just as important as physical ones," Mr. Miller said gently. "And from what you've told us, those needs aren't being met." Mrs. Miller reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "This is the number for a family counseling center in Hartford. They have resources for young people in difficult family situations." Mr. Miller added, "And here's my cell phone. Would you like to try calling your grandmother again? You mentioned she's been supportive." This time, with the stress of immediate danger behind me, I was able to remember Grandmother Eleanor's number correctly. When she answered, her voice was thick with sleep. It was past midnight. But she became fully alert the moment she realized it was me. "Natalie? Sweetheart, where are you? Your parents called hours ago saying you were staying at a friend's house tonight." The lie didn't surprise me, but it still hurt. I explained what had happened, trying to keep my voice steady. Grandmother's reaction was immediate and fierce. "Which bus are you on? What's the next stop? I'm coming to get you right now." Mr. Miller gently took the phone and spoke with my grandmother, explaining where the bus would stop next and arranging to meet there. When he handed the phone back to me, Grandmother's voice was tight with controlled anger. "I'll be there in 45 minutes, Natalie. Don't worry about anything. I'm coming." The Miller stayed with me until the bus reached the designated stop, a service plaza just off the highway. They waited on a bench with me, Mrs. Miller's arm around my shoulders, until Grandmother Eleanor's car pulled up. The moment I saw her, something broke inside me. I ran to her and collapsed into her arms, sobbing like a much younger child. She held me tight, one hand stroking my hair. "I've got you," she whispered fiercely. "I've got you now." The drive to Grandmother Eleanor's house was quiet. I was physically and emotionally exhausted, slumped in the passenger seat while Grandmother white-knuckled the steering wheel, her jaw clenched in barely contained fury. She had tried calling my parents repeatedly, but they weren't answering. "They're probably still on the road to Vermont," I offered weakly. "No excuse, grandmother snap." "There are rest stops. They could check their messages." Grandmother's house was a cozy Cape Cod-style home in a quiet neighborhood about 20 minutes from our house. She led me to the guest room that was always ready for me, with its lavender walls and bookshelf full of classics she thought I might enjoy. "Take a hot shower, put on some pajamas, and try to rest," she said, squeezing my shoulder. "I'll make you some tea." The shower helped wash away the physical grime of the journey, but nothing could cleanse the emotional stain of being abandoned by my own parents. When I emerged in borrowed pajamas, Grandmother was sitting on the edge of the bed with a steaming mug of chamomile tea and honey. "I've left messages for your father to call me immediately," she said. "I've also called Judith." Judith was my mother's mother, who lived in Rhode Island. We rarely saw her, maybe once a year at Christmas, and those visits were always tense. I'd always assumed she wasn't interested in being part of our lives. "Why call her?" I asked, sipping the tea gratefully. "Because she's your grandmother too, and she deserves to know what's happening." Grandmother's expression was grim. "There's a lot you don't know about the family dynamics, Natalie. But that's a conversation for another day.
For now, you need sleep."
Despite her urging, sleep didn't come easily. I lay awake replaying the day's events, trying to understand how my parents could have done this. Around 3 in the morning, I heard grandmother's phone ring, followed by her voice, low but intense. You did what? The volume increased with each word. Richard Andrew Patterson, have you lost your mind? She is 13 years old. I crept to my door and opened it a crack, listening to the one-sided conversation. No, she did not cheat. She used her intelligence and the kindness of strangers to avoid being victimized. Because that's what could have happened, Richard. Do you have any idea what could have happened to her? A pause. Don't you dare laugh. This isn't funny. This is child endangerment. No, I'm not being dramatic. Ask any police officer or child welfare worker. She's with me now, and she's staying here until I decide you're fit to have her back. Another pause, longer this time. I don't care what your plans were. You abandoned your daughter 200 miles from home without a phone or adequate money. What did you expect would happen? That's the most twisted logic I've ever heard. Building character? You could have put her in serious danger. Grandmother's voice became even more controlled, which somehow made it scarier. You will return home tomorrow. Not to Vermont, home. And we will discuss this face to face. And Richard? If you ever do anything like this again, I will not hesitate to call Child Protective Services myself. I don't care if you're my son. Do I make myself absolutely clear? I quickly retreated to bed when I heard her hanging up. Minutes later, my door creaked open and grandmother peeked in. I know you're awake, she said softly. I'm sorry you had to hear that. What did they say? I asked, sitting up. Grandmother sighed, coming to sit on the edge of the bed. They thought it was funny. They're shocked you're here already. Apparently they expected it would take you days to figure out how to get home. Your father said something about how you're too book smart and not street smart enough, and this was supposed to teach you resourcefulness. She took my hand. They're coming back tomorrow. They're not happy that you're here with me. Your father said you cheated by getting help. What was I supposed to do? I asked, my voice cracking. Exactly what you did, grandmother said firmly. You kept yourself safe. That's all that matters. The next day, around noon, my parents' car pulled into grandmother's driveway. Trevor was with them, looking bored and slightly annoyed at the detour. Grandmother instructed me to wait in the kitchen while she met them at the door. I could hear their voices in the foyer, my father's defensive, my mother's placating, grandmother's steely, with controlled rage. It was a character-building exercise, my father was insisting. Kids today are too coddled. When you were a boy, grandmother cut in, you were never abandoned at a train station. Don't you dare pretend this is normal parenting, Richard. Oh, come on, mother, my father scoffed. She was perfectly safe. It was a public place in broad daylight. With strangers who could have been anyone, grandmother retorted. Predators look for vulnerable children, Richard. You put her at risk. My mother's voice chimed in, her tone dismissive. Natalie is too sensitive. It was a joke, a family prank. She's turning it into a federal case. Because it could have been one. Grandmother's voice rose. What you did could legally be considered child abandonment. At this point, Trevor spoke up. She's fine, isn't she? Stop being such a drama queen. I flinched at his words, so similar to what her parents always said. Grandmother's voice became ice cold. Trevor, I suggest you think very carefully before speaking again. Your sister could have been hurt or worse because of your parents' irresponsibility. Whatever, Trevor muttered. She always gets special treatment anyway. I couldn't take it anymore. I walked into the foyer, facing my family. My mother immediately rushed forward as if to hug me, but I stepped back. How could you do that to me? I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. You left me alone with no phone, barely any money, 200 miles from home. What if something had happened to me? But nothing did happen, my father replied impatiently. You're fine. And you would have figured it out eventually. She figured it out immediately, grandmother interjected. She used her intelligence and found help, which is exactly what she should have done. My mother sighed dramatically. You're blowing this out of proportion, Natalie. It was a joke. Can't you take a joke? Something snapped inside me. A joke is supposed to be funny. Was it funny when I realized you'd abandoned me? Was it funny when I had to rely on the kindness of strangers because my own parents put me in danger? Tell me what part was supposed to make me laugh. My father's face darkened. That's enough, young lady. You will not speak to your mother in that tone. We came to take you home, and you're coming with us now. This conversation is over. No, grandmother said firmly, placing herself between us. She's staying with me tonight. You three need to go home and think about what you've done. And before Natalie comes home, I want a genuine apology from all of you. My father looked like he might argue, but something in grandmother's expression stopped him.
Fine.
One night. And Natalie, you're grounded for 2 weeks when you come home. No books, no computer. Grounded? Grandmother echoed incredulously. For what? Being abandoned? For running to Grandma instead of figuring it out herself. Trevor smirked. That was cheating. Out, Grandmother ordered, pointing to the door. All of you, out of my house now. After they left, I broke down completely. Grandmother held me while I cried, assuring me that I had done nothing wrong, that their behavior was inexcusable, that she would make sure this never happened again. The next day, my parents returned, offering stiff, clearly insincere apologies that grandmother deemed acceptable only because she could see I wanted the conflict to end. The car ride home was silent and tense. For the next week, our house was like a minefield. My parents spoke to me only when necessary, and Trevor took every opportunity to mock me for tattling to Grandma. I discovered through eavesdropping that my parents had told neighbors and friends that I had run away for attention during our trip, completely inverting the truth. The following Monday, I was called to the school counselor's office. Mrs. Bennett, a kind woman with curly gray hair and warm eyes, asked me to sit down. Natalie, I received a concerning call about you, she said gently. A woman named Martha from Greenfield Station called our school. She was worried about you and wanted to make sure you got home safely. My chest tightened. I hadn't expected Martha to follow up. Part of me was touched by her concern, but another part was terrified of the consequences if my parents found out I was discussing the incident with school authorities. I'm fine, I said automatically. Mrs. Bennett studied me carefully. Martha told me that your parents left you at the train station as some kind of test. Is that true, Natalie? I stared at my hands, torn between the lifetime habit of protecting my family's image and the desperate need to have someone validate that what happened to me was wrong. Natalie, Mrs. Bennett said softly, whatever you tell me stays between us unless I believe you're in immediate danger. But I can't help if I don't know what's happening. Looking into her kind eyes, I made a decision that would change everything. Yes, I whispered. It's true. And it wasn't the first time they've treated me like I don't matter. If you've ever been treated unfairly by family, you know that sick feeling in your stomach when you're trying to decide whether to keep quiet or stand up for yourself. I was at that crossroads, and what happened next would change everything. Before I continue, I'd love to know if any of you have faced similar family betrayals. Sometimes knowing we're not alone gives us the courage to take the next step toward healing. After my conversation with Mrs. Bennett, I realized something fundamental had shifted inside me. The illusion that my family would ever treat me fairly had shattered completely. While Mrs. Bennett couldn't take immediate action based on a single incident without physical harm, she gave me something perhaps more valuable, validation that what my parents did was genuinely wrong, not a normal teaching moment as they claimed. What you're describing is a pattern of emotional neglect and favoritism, she explained. And the train station incident crosses into potential endangerment. I want you to know that none of this is your fault, Natalie. On my way home that day, I stopped at the drugstore and bought a small leather-bound journal with my allowance money. If no one would believe me without evidence, then I would create that evidence. I would document everything. That night, I began my first entry. May 15th, 2008. Today I started this journal to record the truth. 3 days ago, my parents abandoned me at Greenfield Station, 200 miles from home, as a joke to test my resourcefulness. They took my phone, left me with $20, and drove away laughing. When grandmother Eleanor intervened, they were angry at me for getting help instead of solving it alone. They've told everyone I ran away for attention. This journal will be my evidence of what really happens in this house. Asterisk, I hid the journal in a hollowed-out copy of War and Peace that I knew neither my parents nor Trevor would ever touch. Every few days, I would smuggle it to grandmother's house during my visits, storing it in my dresser drawer there for safekeeping. My documentation was methodical. I recorded dates, times, exact quotes, and contexts. I noted the disparities in how Trevor and I were treated, the dismissal of my achievements, the constant criticism of my personality and interests. It wasn't just cathartic, it was empowering. Each entry reinforced that I wasn't imagining things or being too sensitive, as my mother constantly claimed. May 20th, 2008, Science Awards Ceremony at school today. Won the Henderson Prize for Highest Achievement in Advanced Biology. Parents said they would attend, but didn't show up. Later learned they were at Trevor's baseball practice. Not even a game, just practice. When I showed them the certificate, Dad said, "Another piece of paper for the drawer," and changed the subject to Trevor's potential sports scholarship. Asterisk, May 24th, 2008, Trevor got a C on his history final. Parents took him out for ice cream to cheer him up because he tried his best. I got all A's on finals, but received only a distracted "good job" from Mom while she was texting. Asterisk, June 2nd, 2008. Dad called me worthless when I got a B+ on a physics test. Said I was slacking and not living up to my potential. Same day, gave Trevor $50 for getting a C+ in English, calling it improvement. Asterisk, as the summer progressed, Trevor's behavior toward me worsened, seemingly encouraged by our parents. He would hide my books, delete my homework files from the computer, and make disparaging comments about my appearance and lack of social life. When I complained to our parents, they dismissed it as sibling rivalry and told me to toughen up. June 15th, 2008. Trevor accidentally spilled orange juice on my science competition application. When I told Mom, she said, "These things happen," and suggested I be more careful where I leave my papers. When I pointed out Trevor did it deliberately, she said I was always looking to blame others for my problems. Asterisk, June 18th, 2008. Trevor told his friends I was adopted because I'm too weird to be related to him. They've been calling our house asking for the adopted girl. When I told Dad, he laughed and said, "Kids will be kids." Asterisk, my relationship with grandmother Eleanor strengthened during this time. I spent as many afternoons and weekends at her house as I could manage, often under the pretense of helping her with gardening or organization projects. In reality, these visits were my sanctuary. During one such visit in late June, grandmother made an unexpected suggestion. "I've been thinking, Natalie," she said as we pruned her rose bushes. "Would you like to meet your other grandmother properly? Judith has been asking about you." I was surprised. Mom's mom? But I thought she wasn't interested in us. We hardly ever see her. Grandmother Eleanor's expression was carefully neutral. That's not exactly accurate. There's history there you don't know about. Judith has been kept at arm's length for years because she expressed concerns about your mother's parenting. This revelation stunned me. What kind of concerns? Similar to mine, grandmother admitted. About favoritism, about how you're treated compared to Trevor. She noticed it even when you were very young. Your mother didn't take the criticism well, and your father supported her in limiting contact. A week later, grandmother Eleanor drove me to a small seaside restaurant halfway between our town and Rhode Island. Grandmother Judith was waiting at a corner table, looking anxious but hopeful. She was smaller than I remembered, with my mother's high cheekbones but warmer eyes. The moment she saw me, she stood up and embraced me tightly. "Natalie," she whispered, "look how you've grown." Over lunch, the three of us really talked about the family dynamics. Grandmother Judith explained that she had tried to address the unfair treatment years ago. "When you were about 5, she told me, I noticed how your mother would praise Trevor for the smallest things but barely acknowledge your achievements. I suggested family counseling, and your mother exploded. She accused me of interfering and trying to undermine her parenting. After that, the visits became less frequent, more controlled. Elaine has always been sensitive to criticism, grandmother Eleanor added, and Richard backs her unconditionally. By the end of our lunch, both grandmothers had exchanged phone numbers and made a pact to stay in better communication with each other and with me. You have two grandmothers in your corner now, Grandmother Judith told me, pressing a small silver locket into my hand. This was mine when I was your age. I want you to have it. Inside was a tiny compartment perfect for a small folded paper or a memory card, I realized. Another place to back up my documentation. Meanwhile, at home, the situation was deteriorating. My father's law firm was going through a difficult merger, bringing additional stress home. His criticisms became harsher, his temper shorter. My mother, always his echo, began drinking wine earlier in the day, becoming emotional and unpredictable by evening. July 10th, 2008, Dad lost Johnson account at work. Came home and criticized everything I did, how I loaded the dishwasher, my slovenly appearance, I was wearing study clothes. My antisocial tendencies, I was reading. When I tried to leave the room, he blocked the doorway, saying, "I'm not finished with you yet." Trapped for 30 minutes listening to all my flaws. Mom watched silently, later said I should try harder not to trigger him when he's stressed. Trevor, meanwhile, was caught cheating on a summer school exam he was taking to improve his junior year grades. Instead of consequences, my parents rallied to his defense, blaming the teacher for unclear expectations and the school for excessive pressure. July 15th, 2008, Trevor caught with cheat sheet during summer school final. Parents called emergency meeting with principal. Dad threatened to involve his lawyer colleagues if Trevor faced any serious consequences. Mom brought up Trevor's learning differences, never previously mentioned. Result, Trevor allowed to retake test with no penalty. That night, overheard Dad telling Trevor, "The system is rigged against boys like you. Sometimes you have to make your own rules to level the playing field." Mrs. Bennett, the school counselor, had become another ally. Although limited in what she could officially do without clear evidence of physical abuse, she provided me with resources on emotional health, family dynamics, and long-term planning. "Focus on your future, Natalie," she advised during one of our regular check-ins. "Your academic record is outstanding. With scholarships, you could attend any university in the country. That's your ticket to independence." By mid-August, I had filled nearly half my journal with documented incidents. The pattern was undeniable, even to me. What I had normalized as just how my family is was revealed through documentation to be a consistent pattern of emotional neglect, favoritism, and occasionally outright cruelty. During a particularly peaceful afternoon at Grandmother Eleanor's house, she broached a subject that both terrified and tempted me. "Natalie," she said carefully, "I've been thinking. You could live with me permanently if you wanted to." My heart leaped at the possibility, but fear quickly followed. Dad would never allow it. "He might not have a choice," Grandmother said. "You're 13 now. Courts often consider the preferences of children your age in custody arrangements." Custody? The word felt foreign, dramatic. "You mean like divorce?" "No, sweetheart. I mean a change in guardianship. I've been speaking with a family lawyer friend about the situation. Hypothetically, of course." The idea that there might be a legal way out of my situation was simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. But when my parents found out about Grandmother's suggestion, Trevor had overheard us talking during a rare visit to Grandmother's house and immediately reported back. The reaction was nuclear. My father arrived at Grandmother Eleanor's house unannounced that evening, face flushed with anger. I was upstairs when I heard the front door slam, followed by raised voices. I crept to the top of the stairs to listen. "How dare you suggest taking my daughter?" my father was shouting. "After everything we've done for her, the life we've given her." "The life you've given her is one where she feels unwanted and unvalued," Grandmother responded, her voice steady but firm. "That's ridiculous. She has everything a child could want. Except unconditional love and basic respect," Grandmother countered. My father's voice lowered to a dangerous tone I recognized well. Mother, I'm warning you. Back off. If you pursue this guardianship nonsense, you'll never see Natalie or Trevor again. I'll make sure of it. You'd use your children as pawns? Grandmother sounded genuinely shocked. They're my children, he roared. Not yours. You had your chance at parenting. Now it's my turn, and I'll do it my way. When I returned home that night, my parents presented a united front of cold fury. You have a choice to make, Natalie, my father said, his voice eerily calm. Either you act like a part of this family, our family, not your grandmother's, or there will be consequences. No more visits to Eleanor's. No more special treatment. No more drama. Do you understand? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Good, he said. Because family loyalty means everything. And right now, you're failing that test worse than the train station. That night, I made a difficult decision. I would pretend to comply. I would act the part of the dutiful, grateful daughter they wanted. And all the while, I would continue documenting everything, planning my eventual escape. August 20th, 2008. Dad threatened to cut off contact with grandmother Eleanor if I continue visiting her so often. Said I need to show family loyalty. Ironic from the people who abandoned me at a train station. New strategy. Appear to comply while continuing to document everything. For years until college. I can survive this. I have to. Asterisk. For years passed with excruciating slowness. I was now 17, a high school senior with early acceptance letters from 5 prestigious universities, all offering substantial merit scholarships. My documentation had grown from a single journal to 4 thick volumes, meticulously detailing the ongoing pattern of emotional manipulation, favoritism, and gaslighting in our household. Trevor was now 21 and in his 3rd year at a state college, where he was on academic probation for the 2nd time. His partying had intensified in college, and he'd been caught with marijuana in his dorm room during his sophomore year. My parents had hired an expensive lawyer who got the charges reduced to a warning, and they told family friends it was a misunderstanding. I had perfected the art of emotional detachment, wearing a mask of compliance while focusing entirely on my escape plan. My strategy was simple: excel academically, secure financial independence through scholarships, and maintain the support network I'd built with my grandmothers, Mrs. Bennett, and a small circle of trusted friends. Columbia University is pleased to offer you a full academic scholarship, read the letter I'd been waiting for. Full tuition, room, and board. My ticket to freedom was nearly secured. When I showed the letter to my parents, their reactions were predictably self-centered. Well, we always knew you were smart, my father said dismissively. Though I still think you should have applied to my alma mater. All those hours we spent driving you to the library and science camps paid off, my mother added, as if she hadn't complained about every single trip. See what happens when parents invest in their children? Neither mentioned the fact that they hadn't contributed a single dollar toward my college application fees. Grandmother Eleanor had covered those, just as she'd paid for my SAT prep courses and campus visits. When I mentioned needing modest funds for dorm supplies and textbooks not covered by the scholarship, my father's response was immediate. You got a full ride, Natalie. That should be enough. We're still paying off Trevor's sophomore year, and he'll need support for at least another year at his pace. You've always been independent. Use that famous brain of yours to figure it out. The contrast was stark. They had spent over $20,000 on Trevor's freshman year party damage and legal fees alone, yet couldn't spare a few hundred for my textbooks. What they didn't know was that grandmother Eleanor had been preparing for this moment for years. Shortly after my 18th birthday, she invited me to meet with her financial advisor. I've established a trust fund for you, she explained as we sat in the advisor's office. It's not enormous, but it will cover your educational and living expenses that the scholarship doesn't. It becomes fully accessible to you at 21, but the educational expenses portion is available now. I was overwhelmed with gratitude, but also concerned. Dad will be furious if he finds out. That's why we've structured it carefully, the advisor explained. Your grandmother is still the technical trustee until you turn 21, though the funds are irrevocably yours. Unfortunately, my parents discovered the trust fund's existence sooner than we anticipated. A bank statement was mistakenly sent to our home address rather than grandmother's, and my father opened it without hesitation. The confrontation was immediate and explosive. My father drove to grandmother Eleanor's house with the statement in hand, bursting through her front door without knocking. I was there working on college housing applications. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, waving the statement in grandmother's face. "You set up a secret trust fund for Natalie without discussing it with us? Are you trying to buy her loyalty?" Grandmother stood her ground. "It's not secret, Richard. It's private. There's a difference. And yes, I established a trust to ensure Natalie can complete her education without financial hardship. We are her parents. Financial decisions about our daughter go through us. She's 18 now," grandmother reminded him calmly. "Legally an adult. And this is my money, to allocate as I see fit." My father's face reddened dangerously. "I'll contest this. I'll have my firm's trust attorneys look at every line of this document." "You're welcome to try," grandmother replied. "But the trust is ironclad. I made sure of it." He turned to me then, his expression a mixture of rage and betrayal. "And you? Sneaking around behind our backs, taking money, plotting with her?" Before I could respond, grandmother intervened. "Richard, before you say something you'll regret, there's something you should know." She walked to her desk, unlocked a drawer, and removed a manila folder. "I've been consulting with a family lawyer about Natalie's situation for some time now." My father scoffed. "What situation?" "The situation of having parents who put a roof over her head and food on the table for 17 years. The situation of having parents who abandoned her at a train station 200 miles from home when she was 13, grandmother said quietly. "Among other incidents." She opened the folder, revealing copies of my journals, transcribed and organized chronologically. "My lawyer confirms that the train station incident constitutes child endangerment under state law. The statute of limitations hasn't expired." The blood drained from my father's face. "You've been building a case against us? Your own family?" "I've been protecting my granddaughter," grandmother corrected him. "Something you and Elaine should have been doing all along." My father turned to me, suddenly uncertain. "Natalie, you wouldn't. This is absurd. It was one mistake years ago." "It wasn't just the train station," I said, finding my voice. "It was never just one incident." His expression hardened again. "So that's your plan? Threaten us with legal action unless we what? Bow down to your demands? Pay for everything your scholarship doesn't cover?" "There are no demands," I said quietly. "Just facts. Facts I've documented for 4 years." The confrontation ended with my father storming out, threatening vague consequences. But something had shifted. For the first time, I had stood my ground without backing down, and I had evidence to support my position. In the weeks that followed, I made 2 significant discoveries. First, while helping my mother search for a misplaced earring, I found a diary hidden in her jewelry box. Against my better judgment, I read it, and found entries from 4 years ago discussing the train station prank. "Richard thinks this will finally teach Natalie some humility. She's too confident in her intelligence, too dismissive of practical skills. A few days figuring things out on her own will show her that book smarts aren't everything." Trevor thinks it's hilarious, says she'll probably call 911 in a panic. But I made Richard promise we'll go back for her by nightfall if she hasn't figured it out. Still, a lesson in real-world problem-solving will be good for her. Asterisk, the casual cruelty of it hit me anew. They had truly believed that abandoning their 13-year-old daughter was justified as a lesson. The second discovery was even more disturbing. While searching for a stapler in my father's home office, accidentally knocked over a file box. As I gathered the scattered papers, I noticed financial documents that didn't match what I knew of our family finances. Further investigation revealed my father had been misreporting certain client trust accounts at his firm, temporarily borrowing funds to cover investment losses. I took photos of the documents with my phone, not yet sure what I would do with them, but recognizing their potential importance. Armed with this new information, I realized I now held significant leverage. The question was, what did I actually want? Revenge? Justice? Or simply acknowledgement and change? After careful consideration and long talks with both grandmothers, I decided to confront my parents directly. I chose a Sunday evening when Trevor was visiting from college, ensuring the entire family would be present. "I need to talk to all of you," I announced during dinner. "Can it wait?" "The game's starting in 10 minutes," my father replied without looking up from his plate. "No, it can't wait. I've waited for years already." Something in my tone made all three of them look up. "I know everything," I began simply. "I know the train station wasn't an impulsive decision but a planned lesson. I know you told people I ran away for attention. I know about the financial irregularities at the firm, Dad." The color drained from my father's face. "What are you talking about?" "I have documentation," I continued, "of everything. The emotional abuse, the favoritism, the gaslighting, the potential financial misconduct. I have journal entries dating back 4 years, with dates, times, and exact quotes." "You've been spying on us," my mother gasped. "I've been protecting myself," I corrected her. "The same way you should have been protecting me." "This is ridiculous," my father snapped, recovering slightly. "You're threatening your own family now? Over what? Not getting enough attention? Not getting your way? Over being abandoned at a train station? Over being told I was worthless for getting a B+? Over having my achievements dismissed while Trevor's mediocrity was celebrated? Over being punished for seeking help from grandmother when you put me in danger?" Trevor, surprisingly, didn't immediately jump to our parents' defense. He'd been uncharacteristically quiet during this visit, and I noticed signs of strain between him and our father earlier. "What do you want, Natalie?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual mocking edge. "Money." "I want acknowledgement," I replied. "I want you all to admit what's been happening in this family. I want you to get therapy individually and as a family. And I want a genuine apology, not the performative one you gave grandmother years ago." My father's face darkened. "Or what? You'll go public with these accusations? Ruin my reputation? Destroy this family?" "I don't want to do that," I said honestly. "But I will if I have to. This stops now. The gaslighting, the favoritism, all of it." "You ungrateful little—" my father began, but Trevor cut him off. "Dad, stop."
He turned to me.
"Can I see some of this documentation you mentioned?" I was surprised by his request, but pulled out my phone and showed him some of the journal entries I'd digitized. He read in silence, occasionally glancing up at our parents. "Jesus," he finally said. "Is this for real? You guys actually left her at a train station?" It was a teaching moment, my mother insisted weakly. "We were coming back for her." "After how long?" Trevor pressed. "And did you ever pull something like this with me?" Their silence was telling. Trevor turned to me. "I didn't know, Nat. I mean, I knew they treated us differently, but I didn't know it was this bad." It was the first time he'd called me Nat since we were small children. My parents launched into a desperate counterattack, alternating between threats, guilt trips, and attempts to minimize my experiences. But with Trevor no longer automatically backing them, and with the documented evidence I possessed, their position was weakening. "I'm moving in with grandmother Eleanor until I leave for college," I announced when they finally ran out of arguments. "You have 3 months to decide if you want a relationship with me going forward and what kind of relationship that will be." As I packed my essential belongings that night, Trevor appeared in my doorway. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "I didn't see it. Or maybe I didn't want to see it." "You were a kid too," I acknowledged. "They shaped how you saw me." "Still," he said, "I was a jerk. And I'm sorry." It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was a start. A crack in the family facade that might, with time and effort, allow something healthier to grow. My parents initially called my bluff, convinced I would never follow through with exposing my father's professional misconduct or pursuing legal action for the train station incident. They gave me a week, certain I would come crawling back, apologizing for my dramatic overreaction. I didn't. Instead, after careful consideration and consultation with grandmother Eleanor's lawyer, I sent copies of the financial discrepancies I discovered to my father's two senior partners at the firm. I didn't make accusations or demands. I simply included a note saying I'd found these documents concerning and thought they should be aware of them. The reaction was swift. My father was placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. Within days, several clients had been contacted and irregularities in their accounts confirmed. While the amounts weren't enormous, the breach of fiduciary duty was clear. Meanwhile, word began spreading through my mother's real estate circles that all was not well in the Patterson family. Several of her regular clients quietly took their business elsewhere, uncomfortable with the rumors of family dysfunction and potential legal issues. Trevor, facing his own reckoning at college with failing grades and no parental safety net for the first time, reached out to me via text. Can we talk? Like really talk? No BS. We met at a coffee shop halfway between grandmother's house and his college, an intentionally neutral territory. For the first time in our lives, we had an honest conversation about our family dynamics. I always thought you had it easy, he admitted, staring into his coffee. You are so smart. Everything seemed to come naturally to you. I didn't realize how they treated you when I wasn't around. And I thought you had everything handed to you, I replied. I didn't understand the pressure they put on you to be perfect in different ways. We talked for hours, unraveling years of manipulated perceptions and competitive dynamics engineered by our parents. Trevor confessed he was flunking out of college, drowning in courses he hated, but our father had insisted he take. I never wanted business or law, he admitted. I wanted to study physical therapy. But Dad said that was beneath our family status. This newfound connection with Trevor was unexpected but healing. We weren't instantly best friends, but we were allies in understanding the dysfunction that had shaped us both. 2 weeks after moving to grandmother Eleanor's, I received a call from my mother. Her voice was uncharacteristically subdued. Your father's been suspended, she said without preamble. The firm is conducting a full audit. Our friends aren't returning my calls. Are you happy now? I'm not happy about any of this, I replied honestly. But I'm not responsible for Dad's financial decisions. He was under tremendous pressure, she defended weakly. The family has certain expectations, a lifestyle to maintain. Mom, I said gently, those were choices, not necessities. There was a long silence before she spoke again, her voice cracking. I don't know who we are anymore, Natalie. Everything's falling apart. It was the first genuine moment I could remember having with my mother in years, perhaps ever. No performance, no facade, just raw vulnerability. Maybe that's not a bad thing, I suggested. Maybe what we were wasn't worth preserving. Another week passed before my father finally contacted me. He had been formally suspended for 6 months by the law firm and required to undergo ethics training. The family's social standing was in freefall, with country club acquaintances suddenly too busy for dinner invitations. You've destroyed everything I built, he accused, his voice hoarse with barely contained rage. You were already destroying it, I countered. I just exposed the cracks. After more bitter accusations, he finally asked, what will it take to make this go away? To keep the train station incident private. Therapy, I said simply. Individual therapy for you and Mom. Family therapy for all of us. A genuine acknowledgement of the dysfunctional patterns in our family. And a commitment to change. That's ridiculous, he scoffed. There's nothing wrong with how we parented you. Then we have nothing more to discuss, I replied and hung up. Grandmother Eleanor used her considerable social influence to support me during this time, countering any negative narratives my parents attempted to spread. As a respected former educator and longtime community volunteer, her version of events carried weight. Families have problems, she would say when asked. The brave ones face them honestly instead of hiding behind appearances. 3 more weeks passed before my parents agreed to a family therapy session. They arrived looking diminished somehow. My father without his usual commanding presence, my mother with minimal makeup and uncharacteristically simple clothing. The therapist, Dr. Levine was a specialist in family systems and trauma. She established ground rules immediately. No interrupting, no minimizing others' experiences, no personal attacks. The first session was brutal. My parents attempted to control the narrative until Dr. Levine gently but firmly redirected them. "We're not here to establish who's right or wrong," she explained. "We're here to understand how each person has experienced this family dynamic." When it was my turn to speak, I shared excerpts from my journals, focusing not on the specific incidents, but on how they had made me feel invisible, unvalued, conditional. For the first time, I saw something like recognition flicker across my father's face. "My father was the same way with me," he said quietly. "Nothing was ever good enough." It was a tiny crack in the armor, but a significant one. The therapy process was painful and slow. My mother broke down completely during the third session, admitting she had known the train station plan was wrong but had been too afraid to contradict my father. "I've spent my whole life trying not to rock the boat," she confessed through tears. "With my parents, then with Richard. I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't know how to stop it." My father took longer to show genuine progress. His initial participation was clearly motivated by damage control rather than genuine remorse. But as the sessions continued, layers of his own childhood trauma began to emerge. A domineering father, conditional love, impossible standards. "I thought I was toughening you up for the real world," he told me during our sixth session. "It's what my father did to me. I thought it was normal." "It may have been your normal," Dr. Levine interjected gently, "but that doesn't make it healthy." Trevor's participation in therapy was inconsistent, but increasingly engaged. He had withdrawn from college to reassess his path, taking a job as an assistant at a sports rehabilitation center while considering his options. "I'm done living Dad's version of my life," he announced during a particularly intense session. "I'm going back to school, but for physical therapy, not business." My father's instinctive disapproval was visible, but for perhaps the first time, he visibly restrained himself. Progress was neither linear nor universal. My mother made genuine strides, attending individual therapy twice weekly and gradually finding her voice. My father's journey was more resistant, with breakthroughs followed by retrenchment. Some sessions ended in shouting or tears. Others brought moments of genuine connection. Through it all, I maintained firm boundaries, living with grandmother Eleanor until departing for Colombia that fall. I established clear conditions for contact and refused to engage when old patterns emerged. 5 years passed. I completed my undergraduate degree with honors and was accepted to medical school, specializing in pediatric trauma. The family therapy had continued sporadically, with varying levels of participation and success. My relationship with my mother had evolved into something cautiously positive. She had filed for separation from my father during my sophomore year of college, a move that shocked everyone but ultimately proved healthy for her recovery. She sold her half of the real estate business, downsized to a modest townhouse, and began volunteer work at a women's shelter. "I'm trying to become the person I should have been all along," she told me during one of our now regular phone calls. My father's journey was more complicated. The financial misconduct had effectively ended his career at the prestigious firm, though he eventually found work at a smaller practice. His progress in therapy was inconsistent, his ability to acknowledge his role in our family dysfunction varying wildly depending on his stress levels and circumstances. Our relationship remained distant but civil, with carefully negotiated boundaries and limited contact. Trevor and I, surprisingly, had developed a genuine sibling bond. After completing his associate's degree in physical therapy assistance, he had found his calling working with injured high school athletes. We texted regularly and met for dinner whenever I was in town. "Remember when we couldn't be in the same room without fighting?" he joked during one such dinner. Now look at us, actual functional human beings having a conversation. On the day of my medical school graduation, all of them were there. My mother, my father, seated separately, Trevor, both grandmothers, and several friends who had become my chosen family over the years. The contrast between this gathering and our family dynamics 7 years earlier could not have been starker. After the ceremony, My father approached me awkwardly, holding a small wrapped package. "I'm proud of you," he said, the words clearly difficult for him. "You did this despite us, not because of us." I know that now. Inside the package was his grandfather's pocket watch, a family heirloom I had always admired as a child but had been told would go to Trevor as the only son. "It should go to the person who will value it," he said simply. It wasn't a complete transformation or a perfect Hollywood reconciliation. My father was still my father, difficult, sometimes self-centered, a work in progress. But it was acknowledgement, and after everything, that meant something. 2 months after graduation, I began volunteering at a support program for adolescents from troubled homes. One of the girls, Zoe, reminded me painfully of myself at 13. Brilliant, withdrawn, bearing the invisible wounds of emotional neglect. After gaining her trust over several sessions, I offered to drive her to a special science program at the local university. As we approached the campus, which happened to be near a train station, I noticed her become tense, her eyes fixed on the station building. "My mom left me at a station once," she said quietly. "Said she'd be right back. She was gone for 6 hours. The echo of my own experience hit me with physical force. I pulled the car over and turned to her. "When I was 13, I told her, my parents left me at a train station 200 miles from home as a joke. They wanted to see if I could find my way back on my own." Her eyes widened. "What did you do?" "I survived," I said. "I found help. I documented everything. And eventually, I built a life where I decided who had access to me and on what terms." "Did they ever say sorry?" "Like, really sorry?" "My mom did, eventually. My dad in his own way. But more importantly, I learned that while we can't choose our biological family, we can choose who we allow to be part of our lives. We can build boundaries. We can demand respect." I pointed to the university buildings ahead. "And we can use our experiences, even the painful ones, to become stronger, more compassionate people who break those cycles." As we continued to the science program, I reflected on the long journey from that terrified 13-year-old at Greenfield Station to the person I had become. The joke that was meant to humiliate me had instead been the catalyst for finding my strength, my voice, and ultimately, my purpose. The family I was born into had been broken in fundamental ways. But through hard-won insights, firm boundaries, and the support of those who truly cared for me, I had managed not just to survive, but to thrive, and to help others do the same. That, perhaps, was the most satisfying revenge of all. Looking back at this whole journey, I still wonder how many others have experienced similar family betrayals. If you've ever had to stand up to toxic family dynamics or had to create boundaries with people who should have protected you, please share your experiences in the comments. Your story might help someone else find the courage to seek the respect they deserve. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real stories about family healing and personal growth. And if you know someone struggling with family trauma, sharing this might help them feel less alone. Thank you for witnessing my story. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these experiences is the first step toward healing. Be kind to yourselves, and remember, the family you choose can be more important than the family you're born into.